Hello, my friends. I'm Asha Nayaswami, and we're continuing with our sheltering in place fireside chats. Let's begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, dear friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow at thy feet. We come before you with deep devotion and absolute sincerity. We seek to know God's presence in our lives and to be instruments of that presence to everyone we meet. Guide us, inspire us, bless us, that this aspiration of our heart and soul may be fulfilled. Om Peace. Amen. Because I don't want to forget to say it, those of you who are watching this series in real time, most people watch it later, but those who are watching in real time, next week, which is, is it next week? The last week of June, the beginning of July 2020, is Spiritual Renewal Week at Ananda Village, which in normal circumstances would be a large physical gathering, but this year is a very expanded online event. You can go to the Expanding Light or to ananda.org and sign up for it. It's a paid event, but very economical, especially for what you're going to get. So there will be multiple classes from all the Ananda teachers all over the world, multi-generations of Ananda members. And it's really going to be quite a fine thing with a lot of music and actual guided meditations, all of which is to say I won't be sitting here recording next week. So everything live that you'll want to see, you'll have to go to ananda.org to find it, and I highly encourage you to do so. And then the following week, we will reappear. Okay. Right now, we've just started a new cycle of a subject that we're going to explore. Yesterday, I introduced it, the 8 manifestations of God, and now, I bet you can guess, we're going to talk about each of the 8 manifestations. So the order of the manifestations, the way I'm going to do it, is love, peace, calmness, joy, energy, wisdom, light, and sound. I always have to count to make sure I get them all. So probably in that sequence, day by day, we'll talk about how each one can be accessed and used to help keep us on track in our moment-to-moment effort to expand our consciousness. I gave the whole context in the introduction, so now I'm just going in the introductory talk yesterday. So now I'll just plunge in. Love is usually where we start, because love is where a lot of people start when we're sort of waking up to our own desires, our own potential. What is it that we're looking for? Because love is where we start. You know, not all sexual union is inspired by love. Some of it is inspired by lust. But many children are conceived, and we would like to think that all children should be conceived in an atmosphere of love, where a man and a woman have at least an attraction, let us hope an affection for one another, that creates an invitation. And the way Master describes it, it's so beautiful. He said, when the sperm and ovum come together, it creates a flash of light in the astral world, and that flash of light has the vibration of what the birth potential is going to be. This is actually also the question as to when the soul enters the baby's body, which is an important question if people are thinking of terminating pregnancies. Master said it's at the moment of conception, which is not the answer that some people would want, but it's the answer that he gave. And in the astral world, if a soul is ready to incarnate and is in tune with the vibration of that flash of light, Master said it will rush to get into the womb. I have no idea why he phrased it that way, because he even talked about there being certain competition to get into the womb, and sometimes more than one soul will be able to get into the womb. It's beyond my comprehension, but the whole thing rather charms me, is the only thing I can think of to say. It's not that every single detail of that incarnation is exactly perfect, although everything is part of the karmic cycle, but there's enough harmony there. Here's a funny part too. Master said that if a child wants to be born, if the soul wants to be born, sometimes the soul, and I'm quoting, when the man and woman are together, the soul will project erotic thoughts into the room so that the couple will be inspired to have sexual intercourse so that the child can come into the womb. Oh my gosh, considering how many times people have sexual relations and how few by comparison times they get pregnant, you realize that there's a whole nother force at play here. Pregnancy, we may invite the soul, but the soul makes its own decision. And sometimes a surprise, and sometimes a conscious decision on everybody's part. But the whole point of it is, it's a love relationship, ideally. It's a love relationship. There are exceptions, but it's meant to be. The mother feels the child in her womb. The father is thrilled at the coming. Friends are going to be reunited. That is the ideal that we're talking about. And I've never myself given birth, but I've been present on a number of occasions, and I certainly remember it from past incarnations. Many people say, I never knew what love was until I had children. Especially, I never knew what selfless love was. One friend of mine, who became the father of 2 children after being on the path for about 10 years or maybe longer, he said to me, I thought I was a pretty selfless person. And he was. He was very generous and not particularly self-seeking in any way. But he had to say, just frankly, I never knew what love was until my sons were born. He said, selfless love is that the self absolutely ceases to be of any importance. The only importance is the welfare of the other. He said, you can say I'd be willing to die for someone. He said, but you're just willing to die for your children. He said, it's an instantaneous thought in your mind that if there was any threat to the child, I would give up my life without even a second's hesitation. The love is that strong. Now, the reason that so many people are impelled to have children is because what we're here to learn is we're here to learn perfect, selfless love. And because of the whole cosmic drama of bearing and raising children, it draws out of us. You see, true selfless love requires that we raise our energy to a much higher vibration. And unfortunately, most people will not raise their energy to such a high vibration unless they're compelled to do so. They're either compelled by their own longing, their own spontaneous longing, or they're compelled by circumstances. The way I think of it in terms of the spiritual progress altogether, ideally, we should be so attracted by the light. The beauty of the light should be so attractive to us that we simply run toward it. But if we're not willing to run toward it of our own free will, then God lights a fire behind us. And he often, just sets us on fire from the back so that we have to start moving forward toward the light. But either way we move, and that's the important factor. A woman friend told me once when she went to India and met this woman guru who became her guru. She said she'd been traveling in India for some time, and if you're a solitary traveler, and she was traveling, with a backpack and that way that young people often do. And she said, you learn to be, of course, very careful about your belongings because there are people who would take advantage of you, pick your pockets, or in one way or another, see you as a source of something that they want. So she said, you manage all the time to know where your bags are, to know where your wallet is, to know where your passport is. You just don't mess around with those things. And she said she'd been several months in India and had become quite adept at that. She went to this ashram and had all her possessions with her because she always did, especially when she was moving. So she walked into this ashram, and the woman guru was in the ashram hall. She caught a glimpse of her. She said she just dropped everything she was carrying, her money, her passport, everything. She just dropped it on the ground, ran to sit in front of that woman, and she said it was like hours later before it even crossed her mind. It was what she had done. It just like everything was forgotten. Everything was forgotten in that divine recognition. And that's what real divine love is. There's no thought of self, there's no thought of self-definition, there's no thought of what I need to maintain for myself. Even the most profound instinct of all of self-preservation, my friend was telling me, it just ceases to exist. Now, that's what we're really talking about when we're talking about God is love. In Sanskrit, they have another word for it, and that word is prem. And prem is divine love. It's not, oh, I love peanut butter sandwiches. I love the Tesla that I just bought. Or even, I love my wife. I love my husband. If that love is incomplete, has not yet completed its sense of perfection. So much of the time, in a human way, we long for love, but what we long for is to be loved. Even if we long to give love, it tends to be in a reciprocal sort of way, which is I will give to you because then I know you will give to me, and we're looking for something to complete us that requires less of us than to feel completed on the level of divinity, which is what we really have to rise to. In our Festival of Light, and I believe I was talking about this recently, although I talk about it in a lot of different places, so I don't know where I talked about it. With all the broadcasting, I could have been talking to the group in Serbia about it. Now that I think about it, I don't really know. And then it would have been translated into Serbian, but it was also in English. But there's 4 stages of the soul's long journey described in the allegory of the little bird in the Festival of Light. And the 4th and last stage, we call it the redemption. But it describes the state of a master, but this is how it's described. Here then is the 4th and last stage on the soul's journey from a life of infinite joy and freedom in God, willingly to embrace limitation, pain, and death for the salvation of mankind. Such ever has been the sacrifice of the great masters for the world. So what we're describing is an avatar who's born in the Bible. They talked about Jesus being born without sin, but the best translation of the word sin is ignorance. Jesus was born without ignorance. He totally understood the nature of God and the nature of fulfillment, the nature of happiness. Another way to say he was born without karma. Karma is unlearned lessons, so ignorance is another way of describing karma. So the avatar is completely free and incarnates only for the sake of uplifting mankind. So when we hear the Festival of Light, that's what we say. Such ever has been the sacrifice for the great masters for the world. But then the next sentence is here then is the 4th and last stage of the soul's long journey, which is that all of us must reach the point where we willingly give up what appears to be our comfort, because that comfort means nothing compared to the opportunity to serve. And Paramhansa Yogananda in God's Boatman, which is a beautiful poem that just a couple of days ago, one of our Ananda Palo Alto teachers, Keshava, used it as the theme for his morning broadcast. You can find that somewhere online with Ananda Palo Alto. But one of the lines in there is that Master describes his commitment to bring his disciples to God. He said, I will cross crags, on bleeding feet, I will cross crags of suffering 1,000,000 times if necessary, as long as one stray brother is left behind. It's a pretty high standard, is what I'm trying to say. So when we're talking about the 8 manifestations of God, we have to realize that this is a spiritual practice for us to be able to actually manifest to others what is truly divine love. And we also have to be kind to ourselves and realize we have to start wherever we start, because we cannot understand the joy of absolute selfless love just by hearing that as an idea. We have to experience it. And the way we experience it is we try. There's lots of different theories of spiritual growth. Mine has always been the throw yourself into it and see what happens. And the worst that will happen, is that it won't work out and it'll prove to be a disaster. And in the process of making colossal mistakes, one will learn, because we only learn from experience. We don't learn from being told. So God plants in us, and this is where I was starting, with the desire to have children and the joy of being loved as a baby. He plants in us from the very beginning this experience of the potential of both giving and receiving love. And then we're compelled by it. Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall know God." Sri Yukteswar, commenting on that marvelous biblical promise, describes what he calls the stages of purification of the heart. And the beginning stages of purification, which is, I think, 3 out of 5, the way Sri Yukteswar describes it, is that we are compelled into relationship with one another. And only after we have learned a great deal about love are we able actually to continue in solitude and have us not fall back from that level of selflessness that God wants us to attain. So we learn, we are compelled by the need of it's the need of our soul. It's not just the compelling sexuality of our body or the desire to have something of my own to love, which is how people unfortunately often think about babies. This baby is mine, which does not usually end well, but it's a good beginning. So we want to have this experience because we know, or we get a kitten or a puppy or a house plant or something, even just a home itself. We desperately want to be able to give give love, and hopefully also to receive it, because for most people, at least in our imagination, it's the most beautiful and compelling thing that we can have, because it is the thread of the divine just pulled down to where we can see it. No matter how small it is, a little child's love for her dolly is just a little piece of that beautiful unconditional love of God. So now, coming back to the way we're talking about it here, um, in our lives, and I was talking about this yesterday, laying the groundwork for this. every moment of our life, we have exactly the same potential to be a channel for the divine, to be the recipient of divine love, to be in the presence of God. And whether or not we experience that just depends on how we have oriented ourselves and what is flowing through us. And depending on our temperament and depending on the circumstances, as I was saying yesterday, we choose among these 8 manifestations what we can access and what's appropriate. And we get to practice. We get to practice being a channel of God into this world. And for many people, loving people comes very naturally. And even if it doesn't come naturally, it's worth developing. But here again is where I spent so much time just talking about what is true love. the idea, it's very interesting. In the West, the ideal of feminine love, and I don't want to exaggerate, but the seductress is considered to be a very admirable form of feminine love. I don't even just mean woman, I just mean feminine love. And the way women dress, the kind of women who are admired, the way people go out in public, sexuality is celebrated, youth is celebrated. So this idea of love is that I draw you to me, and maybe I'll give you, some physical pleasure and respond. In the Eastern culture, especially India, the ideal of feminine love is the mother. And the mother, because the mother is totally self-sacrificing. And so we begin in the West with, I'm going to draw someone to me, they will love me, and then in return, I will love them back. And it is also a good starting point, because once we have formed that intimate bond, whether it's sexual or not, whether it's friendship or whatever it is, we begin to have an experience of both giving and receiving love. And experience is a great teacher. And from both the joy and the pain of that experience, we begin to learn. It's just as simple as that. Oh, if I'm only thinking of myself, I don't always get what I want. So what appears to be a good idea actually ends up hurting me. But if I'm thinking in terms of how I can serve, which is how a mother thinks, what does this person need from me? A mother raising multiple children has to think what each different child needs. What the baby needs is quite different than what the 15-year-old child needs. Both may be her sons or her daughters, but what they need from her is completely different. So she doesn't think, what do I have to give? What are they going to give to me? I'm talking in terms of ideals, but she thinks, what do they need from me? I was trying to help a woman who was struggling in her marriage. She had 2 sons, and she was a very good mother to her sons. But the way she treated her husband, I said to her, would you ever talk to your sons the way you regularly speak to your husband? And she was quite chagrined to say, no, of course I wouldn't. I said, why would you not talk to your sons that way? She says, well, I wouldn't want to hurt them. And it wouldn't be good for them. Oh, has it occurred to you that maybe your husband needs the same thing from you? So what we need to do is we need to understand that love is being appropriate in our responses for the sake of helping others, especially when we're talking about love as one of the 8 manifestations of God. It isn't enough to indulge ourselves. We have to actually be thinking what is needed. Now, partly, I'm phrasing that very carefully. What is appropriate in the situation and will be of service to others. Now, let's go back to thinking of a mother, because it's the clearest way to think about it. Many times, a mother must be very stern. And the child may want something, may demand something, may insist on something, may make the mother's life extremely difficult. But if the mother is acting from wisdom and true selfless love, if it's not right for the child, she won't give it. And even if, I hate you, mother, you're the worst mother in the world, I'm sorry about that, but it's just too bad. I remember watching a mother that I knew very well with her son, and her son was quite strong-willed, and she was very definite about what was appropriate and what wasn't, and she was very good at knowing. And he was trying to persuade her to change her mind. She looked at him kindly, but very definitely, and said, when I speak to you like this, have I ever changed my mind? He thought about it and he said, no, Mommy. And she said, and I'm not going to start now. And it was just, that was that. Because he was not acting in his own best interest. And even though he was assaulting her with his temper, she wasn't going to move. Sometimes we have to be very stern. Master talked about uniting the world under, the flag of self-realization, meaning that when people begin to realize our shared reality as children of God, then it will open the world to a level of peace and harmony that we have not yet known as we move into a higher age now, haven't known for many millennia. But Master said, even in that context, even talking about that, he said, but there will still be bullies. And he said, so we will also need a global police force that will discipline the bullies and keep them from harming others. Now, is it love to let a bully run rampant? It's not even loving the bully, because when you allow him to exercise his evil impulses and hurt others and acquire bad karma for doing it, just because we want to be nice, we want to try to love him instead of disciplining him, that's not love, that's selfishness. That's being unwilling to take an unpleasant stance when an unpleasant stance is necessary. That is being unwilling to forego the idea that everybody's going to love me. Because as long as you're thinking about who's going to love me, you can't always think, and you often can't think at all, about what will really help this person. No, sometimes what will really help this person is to allow them to love you, allow them even to lavish love upon you, because it's good for them to do so, because they need to learn to love. And it's also the fact that it's enjoyable for you is not a sin. It's perfectly reasonable. It's the way God made us. Learning to receive is also being a channel for God's love. Because some people then, with all the things that I've said about selflessness, they become totally confused and think that I'm worthless. I'm worthless is a very selfish thought. A friend of mine recently was talking about a medical emergency that they had, but it was the weekend. And so they suffered greatly through the whole weekend because they didn't want to disturb others. And the friend to whom she was telling it, her feelings were profoundly hurt. Why can you not trust my friendship? How could you possibly imagine that I would want you to suffer? That whatever I was doing was more important than coming to help you. So learning to receive is also part of being selfless. To trust that when someone says, I love you, I want to help you, instead you insult them by refusing to ask for their help, refusing to accept it, as if they're insincere and dishonest with you, and so selfish that they don't want to help you. You see? So sometimes the very best thing you do is you allow people to help you. And a good mother not only allows, but engineers it so that her children will also have to help her. Because it's not good for them to think only, oh yeah, mother's there just to give to us. I don't have to really deal with it because mother will fix it. Really? A friend of mine, her son took a laundry pen and marked up his shirt, even though she told him not to. Now, she says it was her fault. She should have done more than say no. She should have taken it out of his hand. But she said, what will happen if you mess up your shirt? He just said casually, oh, Daddy will buy me a new one. And the mother thought, no, this is not how this is going to work. That Daddy's just there to buy me a new shirt. This is not love for my child to raise him like that. So she made him buy his own shirt with his piggy bank. And he was of an age where the value of money was the sheer quantity. So there they are in the store, and she's buying it from his piggy bank. She starts with the pennies. It's like a $7 or a $10 shirt. She starts with the pennies because then he has to just watch all his money disappear. And as he watched his money, this is in a public place, as he watched his money disappear, he became more and more agitated until finally he was literally screaming and pounding on the counter. And she just quietly continued to count the money because he needed to understand, no, Daddy is not there to buy you a new shirt. You can't just ruin the things you have because Daddy's going to buy it. You're going to have to learn that you also have to give back. She said she's not sure if the lesson took, because even though he had a tantrum in the store and she feared she was going to get arrested for child abuse, which fortunately she didn't, afterwards, every time he wore the shirt, he would say, I bought this myself. But he did buy it himself. So that's what we're trying to be. We're trying to be as a perfect mother would be to us. Whenever a situation we don't know what to give, think, what would Divine Mother do? If a perfect mother were here, How would she respond? And then ask her to flow through us. Because we may not be able to do it on our own. But if we say, God, I want to be your channel in this world, lift my consciousness above human limitation and use me as your instrument. And then the secret here is what Master said, the channel is blessed by what flows through it. And not only will we be able to give and uplift to others, but in the very doing we will find ourselves changed. God bless you.